Well, hello there, Carl.
Michael Kitces, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. We're like squarely in 2024 and underway. We're like plowing through the first quarter. I'm a little thrown because I my brain still wants to be in 2023, and I've realized we've totally lost that ritual where you write the new year on the check. And like when you write the new year on the check and you don't put the wrong year by mistake and cross out and write the right year, like that's when you're really in the new year. And like I
Right.
haven't written a check in years. So like
Yeah.
this whole turning the calendar thing to me has gotten very strange of like, oh, I guess we're like well into the new year now because we're
Oh
already
no.
through most of the first quarter.
Yeah, it's really crazy. So fast and fun and amazing and all those things for sure.
So what's on your mind these days?
I've been having this repeated experience for it's been a couple of years, probably since we've been back from New Zealand, so 3 years.
Okay.
I get this email. People know, I mean, I live in Park City and lots of people travel to Park City. So it's like somebody's traveling to Park City and they read something or listen to one of the podcasts and they say, hey, can we get together? I'd love to just chat with you. I'm like, okay. And I kind of know what's coming. So I've started actually having, and it's interesting because this is
You
often
you
people
know why you know why they want to meet with you in advance.
a little bit. I'll tell you this in just a second, but yes, I sort of know what's happening. And it's interesting. It's often people from our even, I'd go so far as to even say our profession, like this little
I was
group
gonna
of
say,
real
like, is
financial
this
advisors.
advisor world or like consumers? Because you got the column and now the 50
Yeah,
Facts podcast. Like you appear in many places.
both, but it's often people in our industry speaking
Okay.
broadly and often even narrowly like
Okay.
financial planners and advisors. And
I
so
call
I,
them
I
advisors, but yes,
it's fine. You can call them whatever you want, my friend.
I appreciate that.
So I often try to meet at the same coffee shop, or if it's in the summer on the same trail. And this repeated thing happens where they kind of look around, and so far this experience has been the majority have been men, and they look around and they're in the age cohort 45 to 55, and that might be a function of what's going on here. They look around and they say I won, and some example, like balance sheet example, like I sold a business, I make $1 million a year, like I make more money than I ever thought, or I sold a business for $20 million or whatever. Like some balance sheet example is like the definition of I won. And then they look around and make sure nobody's listening. This has happened at conferences too. Make sure nobody's listening, and they say like, is this all it was for? Right? Like, is this all it was for? Is this why I did it all? And having had this experience enough, and it lines up. I mean, there's a reason people are asking me because I write and talk about this a bit. It lines up with this idea of like the best comparison I have is the old Stephen Covey quote that often we spend our whole lives, and I'm paraphrasing, often we spend our whole lives climbing to the top of the ladder only to find out it's leaning against the wrong wall.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of that going on. And I think the pandemic accelerated it. I think we got permission to ask questions that we never thought we could ask before, like where do I want to live? What kind of work do I want to do? Do I like these people in my house? Like
Yeah.
like just all sorts of almost existential questions.
Yeah.
And so I've been thinking a lot about that, like this idea of like the ladder and the balance sheet and what's it all for and money and meaning. And sometimes I feel sort of like you know, I don't know, like mountain town hippie for thinking this way. And then what do you get from Bain? Right? Bain comes out with his report. And what did they call it? They called it the
Bain
pyramid of
the
value.
Bain the consulting firm, not the comic
Bain
film.
Capital.
Sorry, my I hear Bain and I go to different places than Bain Capital.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Bain Cap, the
The
consulting
consulting
investment
arm
smart people firm.
and McKinsey said something very similar, but Bain's is really striking because I always feel like they're like a button down, like button down consulting firm. And they put out this thing. What did they call it? The pyramid of value?
Okay.
Is that what they called
Yeah,
it?
I've seen this bouncing around. Now I want to
Yeah.
actually like find it online while we do this episode so that I can
Yeah,
talk
yeah. It
about it
was it
readily.
was it was basically like think of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs
Okay.
for financial advice.
Okay. All right,
And
I've
what was
got
the
it.
most valuable thing? And at the top, what did they put there? Self-transcendence? Self-actualization?
Yeah. So yeah, so
Self-transcendence?
it's self-transcendent. So it's got four tiers. All right, let me see. I'll turn this on as a screen share for anybody who is on the video version of this. So so you've got like a pyramid of things you can do that are valuable that's kind of broken into four tiers. So the bottom tier, the base of the pyramid, is labeled functional. So
Hmm.
this is things like informs, reduces costs, reduces efforts, reduces risk, makes money, simplifies, saves time. Frankly, like I feel is where a lot of us
Organizes?
sit in financial planning world, right? Like we
Yep.
we do these things for you to make you more money or save you time and costs. So there's a
Yep.
functional tier. Then above that, there's an emotional tier, reduces anxiety, wellness, fun entertainment, uh, provides access, rewards me. So I'm sort of thinking of this like this is where a lot of us, I think, have gone as advisors. Like, I provide peace of mind.
Yeah. Maybe we'd even put like behavioral finance or behavioral coaching kind of in that category.
So then there's a third tier that's labeled life changing. As someone who likes to think financial planning is already life changing, I'm going to try not to be offended that apparently I'm not in this tier right now, but maybe that's the point of this conversation. So I've got my life changing, provides hope, motivation, affiliation and belonging, self actualization is here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's a fourth tier. We're now at like the very pinnacle. So we had functional, then we had emotional, then we had life changing. Now we get to the fourth tier that's labeled social impact. And it just has one thing: self transcendence. So I'm going to admit I'm not entirely positive about the difference between self actualization and self transcendence, aside from like layers of being I apparently have not achieved yet. Uh, but I'm going to kind of infer from this and sort of the visuals. So there's like little icons for the self actualization is like a person at the top of the mountain planting their flag, and then the self transcendence is that person like helping someone else up the mountain, and it's in the social impact tier. So I'm kind of inferring like the top of life changing is my own self actualization, and self transcendence is like I'm now impacting the world. This is beyond me.
Yeah. Transcending or rising above the self and relating to that which is greater than oneself, right? So it's really like where you start to focus on others and the impact you're having, and so I think you think of it that way, the self-transcendence.
So, so I truly don't know if like this is where you were going with the conversation or not. But now, like I'm looking at this and like, is the implication here I'm supposed to be at like the upper tier? You know, the like the next of financial planning is the self transcendent financial advisor. Well, I guess that would be like about us, but like if you become our clients, we'll help you with self transcendence. Like, is this where we're going? Is that the implication of the discussion here? Or are you just like throwing this out there because you like to do that sometimes?
I both. Like I am fascinated by this because I, one of my favorite topics lately has been purpose and meaning and like taking, turning money into meaning. And you see that in the even down, in the emotional jobs. Well, actually, really in the life-changing jobs, providing hope and affiliation and belonging, motivation, self-actualization. That's all pointing to like having a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning, at least a piece of it. And
Yeah.
I think that's what this, I mean, this is just fascinating to me that this came from Bain, a button-down consulting firm.
Yeah, not the
But
folks
they,
I usually think of to say, let's talk about the self actualization and self transcendent
no,
value of
no,
consumer services.
for sure. And I think what they're pointing at, and I don't know for sure, but I think what they're pointing at is really kind of summed up in that Stephen Covey paraphrase, like we've been really, really good. And by the way, I want to point out something because I think this is really important because I sometimes get accused of devaluing the functional jobs that we do as advisors. And I want you, I like one thing that's really important to me is that the functional jobs are at the base of the pyramid. You take them out, everything falls apart. It's
Because they are
not,
literally the foundation of the pyramid.
yeah, like so important, so important. And right, we're at risk. And I remember that what was it? It was Russ Allen Prince's book, The Private Client Attorney, that he used to sell, which I just thought was brilliant, for like $197 or something. That was what the price was on the back of it. And they give it out at conferences. But I remember he there was a survey in there, and this was, I mean, I think this might be going back 15 or more years. There was a survey in there about estate planning attorneys, and the population that they surveyed, the population was high net worth families that valued and were willing to pay for advice,
Okay.
had paid for the advice. So they'd had an estate plan done, and I can't, there was some number connected to it, like five to $10,000. Like this was real work, especially 15 years ago. And then they didn't do anything with it. And we've all seen that happen,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Have you had your trust work done? Yeah, of course. How come nothing's titled? And
Uh-huh.
like
That's
so
a really
so
awesome, completely unfunded trust that will do absolutely nothing when you die.
yeah. So the question they asked this population in the survey was why? Why
Yeah.
didn't you do anything with it? And the answer, and I'm again, I'm hesitant to put a specific number, but it was 90% plus said this didn't represent what we wanted.
Mhm.
And I remember just feeling like,
Mhm.
man, that's just such a huge risk of you build. And another, like metaphor I sometimes use is like, are we busy building? I would always point to the attorneys, though I wouldn't say us. Don't find an attorney that wants to build a monument to themselves. Find an attorney that wants to get the job done.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think this is the like I'm all of this is pointing to this risk of like if we just do the functional job, I'm not sure that we've got the ladder against the right wall. And and so I don't really know what it means. Actually, I do know what it means. Like to explore purpose and meaning, like for everybody to have a statement of financial purpose, mine's pretty simple. Time with my family, mainly outside, serving in my community, my church. Well, it, if if I keep that in mind and I keep narrowing in on it, like I think it'd be cute of me to think that I've nailed it, but like if I keep thinking about it and narrowing in, like, oh, it turns out I'd rather do that or that or that. Like over time, and we talked about this once with goal discovery over time.
Yep.
I think it's very similar. And then last thing, and then I'll be quiet and hear your reaction. David White, the Irish poet, in his book Consolations, there's an essay called Courage. And in Courage, David White says this beautiful line that only slowly do we learn what we really care about
Mm.
and allow our outer lives to be realigned with that gravitational pull. And I think this is just acknowledging that, like, slowly over time, we start to learn what we really care about. And of course, all of the functional jobs should be done in service of that. And so it means like we have to start with guesses. Like I think,
Yeah.
right? And then we slowly over time, we're a little less wrong with clients. And then we're organizing and we're reducing risk and we're putting quality product in place and we're building the correct calculations in service of what? Well, in service of, and we could call on Simon Sinek here to just say, like, it's just all this is why.
So I'm struck by this that I feel like you've painted a version of this where you know clients are on this journey towards self-actualization, right? Like we as humans are on this journey towards self-actualization, if you want to follow, Maslow's
Mhm.
hierarchy. Um, and I love that David White quote that you shared, right? Of like part of that journey is just figuring out what we act like
Right.
why we think we're actually on this earth, or like I always joke is like what we want to do when we grow up, because I'm 46 and I'm still not sure I know what I want to do when I grow up. That's why I like reinvent myself every 3 years. I'm still figuring it out.
Right.
So part of me, like, I'm struck by how you frame that. I can't come help but come back to this from just like the business ends. Like if I'm in the business of financial advice, being a financial planner, like what do I do with this? What am I supposed to be doing
Mhm.
with this? Because
Mhm.
I think it's kind of the context of Bain putting this out from a business consulting end. Like these are the tiers of value. Like these are the tiers by which you get to provide elevating value out to the consumer marketplace. And I'll admit I got to come back to self-transcendence in a bit. It's gonna take me a while to process that in a financial planning context. But when I go to the first three tiers, right? So like this starts with functional, organizes, saves time, avoids hassle, reduces risk, makes money. I'm like, okay, that's me, that's most of us, and like that's what I do as a financial planner, like literally many of those things. Uh I try to simplify your financial life. I help you manage your risks. I'll save you time because you don't really want to do it yourself. Like we'll try to optimize and increase your wealth. Then there's a segment of us that I think have moved and evolved our businesses and careers into this next more emotional level. I think we've struggled with it in some ways, but like it's all of us who put on our website, my value is that I bring you peace of mind,
Mm.
which I'll admit I have long struggled with because whenever I see that on a website, and I've literally seen that on a few advisor websites, like it's hard for me not to snicker a little. Like, do you know how much crazy I live in my life? Like, you could be the most amazing financial planner. Like, you are not bringing me peace of mind. Like, maybe you can sort of help with like the financial portion of my life, but like you're kind of overstating the amount of complexity I live in my world. Like, uh, a peace of mind is like an unrealistically high promise. And then I reflect back on clients I've sat across from over the years where I'm like, yeah, but no joke. Like, we've actually gotten people there. Like, I remember how stressed and freaked out and miserable they were about money things. And that I didn't just help them with money things, that solving the money things and helping them figure out the money issues then helped them unblock them to figure out work issues and life issues and time issues, which then helped them
Mhm.
work out family issues. And like, geez, we really did take them on a journey that was pretty life changing because the money was like screwing them up and fouling them up in some ways that when we helped them figure out how to solve and remove those roadblocks, like their life kind of transformed way beyond even just the financial advice. We optimized their wealth and saved them X dollars in taxes, which to me sort of goes right to this last tier of, or second to last below self transcendence, like this life changing tier of self actualization, provides hope, motivation, right? Like to me, that's part of our emergence of we're accountability partners now. Like I'm not just going to tell you the money things to do and try to bring you peace of mind. Like I'm going to help you actually get there. Like a trainer, I'm going to give you the occasional kick to the backside if that's what you need, or the pat on the back if that's what you need. Like I'm here to help you actually do the things
Yeah.
that will change your financial life or your life for the better.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, like I look at this chart and the part of me that sat across some clients is like, yes, I've actually taken people down these kinds of journeys.
Yeah.
And then the like business mind of me that says like, so am I supposed to put this on my website and say this is what I do? I'm like, I'm still having trouble getting there. Like I don't know how to say this.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
how we show clients that we do this without making it sound, dare I say, like a little over the top or more than a little.
Yeah. Can I talk about that? I think that's really important. I think, yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. Like hope, motivation, like I think even
I can maybe do the motivation. Like I'll be your accountability partner and
but
give you a
even
kick when you need it. Like I maybe I can do the motivation part in my
yeah,
marketing, but like
I don't think so.
struggling with the
I want to
rest.
talk about there's a big difference, and this comes up a lot in the kind of consulting work that I'm doing right now with some bigger RA firms. It comes up a lot, which is okay, we do all these things, but how do we talk about them?
Yeah.
And I think that's a really, really important conversation because, I think even the most kind of like, you know, I was just going to use the word like stiff and like
Yeah,
old,
yeah.
old, like guys with their arms folded in the back
Yeah.
of the room. Like, I don't do any of this. When you sit down and talk to them and ask them, like, if I go ask your clients what they appreciate about you, they're
Yeah.
probably going to use words like, I feel a little motivated, right? Like, or I feel hopeful, or we're organized for the first time, and that's got me really motivated. Like, that's the
Yeah.
kind of where they're not going to say, Craig designs great portfolios for me. That's not what they're going to say. And so, even the most like,
No offense to Craig and his great portfolios.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like the example I always love using is I've been to mortgage payoff parties. I've never been to an efficient markets portfolio party. So like the feelings make their way into it. And I think everybody recognizes that. I've had those guys in the back of the room with the folded arms and I've gone straight at them and been like, tell me what your clients actually taught. When they say what your value is, what do they say? And they say things like, oh, I know the family really well. Or, the non, the kind of non-interested spouse would be really comfortable working with me. Or they say they just feel secure. I'm like, well, that's not down on the functional level. The things you did at the functional level made that possible, of course, but the words they're
Mhm.
using aren't really often describing the functional level. So here's my take on how we talk about it. And I think there are people who can do this better than me. But my version, in fact, I know there are, but my version of it is I think you're right. It might be a bit too much for most people. Nobody comes in asking for the emotional jobs to be done by you. Then nobody shows up at your office and says, I'm here because I need some hope. Right. But they show up with a presenting problem. So I love the idea of like, let's still show up in the world how they're expecting us to show up.
Okay.
Like maybe there's some softer versions of that, and Kansas State's work on what the office should look like, and maybe the website feels a little bit more like an architect and less like a bank, and maybe a little bit more like a coffee shop, whatever. I mean, like we soften around the edges, but we don't want to make it so it's like showing up for your brain surgeon. He's got like a rubber nose on and a tie-dye shirt. He may be the best brain surgeon in the world, but you're like, whoa, he doesn't look like a doctor. This
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah. There
like
comes a point where the disconnect actually becomes unsettling. Like this is not
you've
the
put a
way I was expecting
barrier.
a professional to show up.
Yeah, one of my clients actually told me this. They're like, just don't put an additional barrier between me and trust. So
Mm.
I love the idea of still showing up because the presenting problem is never hope. The presenting problem is never self-actualization. The presenting problem is I just inherited some money or my 401k, like those are the presenting problems are almost always down at functional level. But I like to think of that as just a righteous trick, like in service of the client always. But we're thinking in our minds like, yeah, performance is really important. I I understand why you're here asking about the fact that your portfolio is performing terribly over at the place. Performance is really important to us too. So that's an empathetic, like, I'm going to greet you where you're at. And then I'm going to just slowly, like, Michael, would it be okay if before we dive into that, we have a little conversation about why performance might matter? Like, tell me a little bit. Like, if we were meeting 3 years from, and you go right into your question, and your question can be anywhere on the spectrum of questions, like with Dan Sullivan, or yours even. Like, why did you come in? What brought you in today? And how do you think I can help? Or Dan Sullivan's, if we're meeting 3 years from today, what
Yeah.
would have to happen? All the way over to George Kinder, who is off the charts good at this. Like, if you think of them as a spectrum, like just dive into the question and Bill Backrack in there. Why is money or what's important about money to you? So we can greet them with the presenting problem, have empathy for it. By the way, we're the ones that taught them they should show up at our offices with the presenting problem, right? So we have to have empathy with that. We can't just be like, Sorry, I don't do that. I only do self-transcendence.
So the idea is, I mean, like the path to success is they're coming in with the money problem, the portfolio problem, the rollover problem, whatever.
Almost like the
They're
functional problem.
they're coming in with the functional problem. Your opportunity is to start being this motivation,
Righteous trickster.
accountability coach that provides them hope and helps them down this self-actualizing journey because it just goes really well and then they tell all their friends.
Yeah, and I don't know that I mean, I've never used the word self-actualization or self-transcendent with a client. Like, hey, I'm so glad you reached our level 4. Where like it's just more like, hey, why are we doing this? Let's get a sense of purpose, the statement of financial purpose. Let's have really clear goals that match the purpose. Which would we would call 10 years ago goal-based planning. Like all of that is insert. Let's just recognize where we're headed, which
Yeah.
is we wake up one day and somebody's like, dude, I'm doing really meaningful things in my community. It's so amazing. And you know what? You made that possible. And I don't think you run in and go, stamp self-transcendence. I just think that's where we're headed is, you know what, I really, man, if there was ever money left over, I'd really like, I care deeply about I just had this conversation with somebody. I care deeply about the local food production in my valley in Colorado. And it's so great right now because I feel like everything else is taken care of. I can spend a little bit of time helping local food produce, like with the farmers market. And
Yeah.
it feels so great. Like that's all. It could be it feels so great because I never wanted to be a burden to the kids, and I've got that nailed down now. And so now I'm actually taking each of the grandkids. I pick one every month, and I take each of them to go do like it's transcended them. It's about the grandkids
Yeah.
now. It's about the food production. It's about the climate. It's about diversity issues that we have. It's about helping in another country, but that's only possible because we nailed down the other things along the way, and we were having these conversations. Like, what would you do? What would it look like? If money was not a thing, what then? Like we're just pointing at it. But
Right.
I don't know that we have it on the front page of our website.
Okay.
Do you? I mean, because I think nobody knows they have a self-transcendent problem and nobody thinks a financial advisor is going to solve it.
Yeah, I think that's really the crux of it is no one you said well, like no one believes that they have these problems or necessarily looks at a financial advisor to solve them. The closest I get is like I the one of these in the life-changing domain I actually can see some marketing around is uh this sort of motivation. I probably wouldn't word it that way, but will be your accountability partner, will help you get done the things that you know you need to get done and you just never quite seem to get around to, and we can help with that. We're really good at that. I don't think that gets to everyone because some clients it's not a motivation problem. They got other stuff going on, but it's not a motivation to action problem. They're good at that. Uh I can
Well,
I can see some segment of marketing on the motivation end, but uh at the same
the
time,
other
like if
one,
all the values at the actualization level, I'm kind of weeping that we can't figure out how to market it better if that's the value that according to Bain, that's the top of the value
well, and I
pyramid.
think
So like if we're
you're
doing it, I want
seeing,
to claim credit, darn it.
yeah, and I think you're seeing people do this a bit. And I think what I'm feeling, I mean, I just discovered this Bain research a couple of days, maybe a week ago, and I felt so like energized by it because I feel like there have been plenty of voices in the wilderness talking about this for 20 years, but they're always kind of like we even have phrases sometimes we like, oh, that's woo woo or
Yeah.
that's so California of you. And I feel like having Bain say it is like, oh, that's so great. But I've been feeling it for 10 years. I've been feeling this move towards that. And the other one I want to just point out, I think heirloom is probably something like legacy, right? And I think like legacy planning,
Yeah.
what legacy do you want to leave is something like, I mean, that's something that we've probably been talking about for a little while. So but yeah, how do you market it? I think there are some really creative ways to do it, and we're seeing. I mean, I think of firms. I mean, we probably both know firms that are doing this kind of work. But I don't think it means you need to run out. I just had a great conversation with the founders of a really large, a couple $1 billion RA firm, and they're in like good Midland, like middle of America, heartland sort of folks. And they're doing this work. They actually internally they say like we're going to bring clients into a sacred space. Like they use words like sacred space. I was blown away. But their public facing stuff is still very much like, hey, I'm not going to put big barriers into you've got a presenting problem. We're going to help you solve it. And then we're going to slowly show you over time what we really do is self-transcendence,
Well, and
which I,
what strikes me just in how you framed it in the example you gave earlier, like it's not even just I'm going to help you start solving your functional money problems, and then later we'll be going down a self-actualization journey. I think part of the power of it is, and you can literally start that journey with the questions you ask in the first discovery meeting or the first
exactly.
prospect
That's
meeting.
exactly right.
And that's how you start doing this is you just start asking questions and opening conversations that no one else has asked them about. And if they're humans that at all resemble Maslow's hierarchy, that will probably be
Yeah.
connecting to them.
I like amen to that. Like that's exactly right. Like and again, we talked about the spectrum of those questions. Like
Yeah.
just find the ones you're comfortable with. They're as simple as, hey, we were meeting 3 years from today.
Yeah.
What would have to happen? And the buying process, this all matches with the research on buying that like what the prospect is thinking in that meeting as they're judging your value is they're saying, I have a desire. They're not actually using these words, but what's going on in their head is desired future state discounted for uncertainty. Right. And so all we're asking the question around is like, what's your desired future state? And again, please don't use that question. That'd be a terrible question. But we're asking questions to uncover. I actually know somebody who does that now. They're just like, what's your desired future state? And they're like, I'm just going to cut to the chase. I'm like, fine. But we're asking questions to try and uncover that. And that offers clues at these emotional jobs and higher, which I just love. It's so good.
Well, very cool. Well, thank you, Carl. This went an interesting direction today.
Amen, Michael. So fun.